Thank you very much. Dear professors, teachers, researchers, and doctoral students, philosophy is the mother of all the subjects as opined by scholars. And I will start with a few points about philosophy, then discuss critical realism, and at the end, agent and subjectivity in the Indic studies. In philosophy, there are in general two key points for social sciences, that is epistemology and ontology. Ontology is about reality, such as virus COVID-19. And epistemology is about knowledge, such as how do you know what caused it. When it comes to ontology, there is two basic positions, realism and irrealism, that is non-realism. Realists think that there is a real universe. The other position is irrealism, which denies that there is a real universe, meaning that there is no reality such as in the social world. In epistemology, there is two positions. There are objectivist and subjectivist, with some positions that fall in the middle. An objectivist position assumes that there is no difficulty in producing knowledge about the world. A subjectivist position is more skeptical. Researchers might argue that our knowledge could be wrong and always changing and transforming. That is, our knowledge is fallible. Subjectivists argue that all our observations are human and theory dependent. A philosophical position thus is made of ontology for realism or irrealism and epistemology for objectivism or subjectivism. This results in three different philosophical positions. One, positivism with realism and objectivism. Two, constructivism with irrealism and subjectivism. And the third one, I suggest, critical realism with realism and subjectivism, which I discuss soon. The first philosophical position is positivism, which takes a realist and objectivist stance. It assumes that the world consists of real things, matter, specifically universal laws. We produce knowledge in objective ways. The problem with positivist ontology is that universal laws do not exist for inside humans, their minds and thinking. The second philosophical position is constructivism, which takes an irrealist and subjectivist stance. In the social sciences, constructivism at times tends to influence studies by encouraging the focus on discourse, meaning, or the experiences of people. This is not a false ontology. The problem is that constructivism may take a too narrow position of a perspective on the world. One possible path is a holistic methodology called critical realism that works with causality for social sciences. This is a suggestion. Philosophers such as British Collingwood stated that causality with reason belongs to the realm of human praxis, and causal analysis proper is well suited for the social sciences. Ram Roy Bhaskar, a philosopher, was born in 1944, had an Indian father, a doctor, and an English mother, an industrial administrator. Roy gained a PhD degree at Balliol College in Oxford and spent the rest of his life to develop critical realism. Critical realism acknowledges that the world is real and that knowledge production is fallible and theory dependent, but not fixed or theory determined. It also agrees with constructivism that meaning and discourse are important, but they are not the only things that exist. Two of the main conclusions of critical realism, which can be important for social sciences researchers, are number one, research should look for causal tendencies, and number two, social sciences research must consider both agency and structure. Let me explain it in the following. According to critical realism, the world has three domains. One, the empirical, that is the events we experience. Two, the actual, that is containing events that are not always experienced, such as a tree falls even if no one is around to see it. Three, domain of the real, containing causal mechanisms. Mechanisms are at times subtle structures that cause events. For example, the gravity that caused the apple to fall on Isaac Newton. Causal mechanisms act here as tendencies. For example, if a study concluded that girls and boys tend to perform less well in maths, This does not allow us to perfectly predict maths scores in the future. There is only a tendency. Critical realism shows that our research must, at least in part, look at causal mechanisms and how they act as tendencies to influence the world we observe. Critical realism also uses so-called retroductive arguments, as in the example of Newton and gravity, to show that both agency and social structures are real. They are both ontological features of the world, and they exist together in relationships. Social structures influence the actions of individuals. Individuals can then reproduce or transform these society structures through their actions. So when we turn to do research, a good way of critical realism from Tom Fryer from the University of Manchester is to ask, one, which philosophy underlies my research? Number two, does my research look for causal mechanisms that act as tendencies? Number three, have I considered both structure and agency? These three questions can be regarded as on the way to a good project, according to critical realism. Ramboy Bhaskar's suggestion of critical realism appears to be partially inspired by Indian philosophy. The retroductive arguments is similar to reason anumana in Indian epistemology, such as the following of Nyaya philosophy. There is a fire on the hill because there is smoke on the hill. Wherever there is smoke, there is fire, like a kitchen hearth, and unlike a lake, this hill is likewise smoky, thus there is fire on the hill. Knowledge based on reason about the made from seeing a smoke on a hill, which is similar to the other arguments mentioned before. After ontology and epistemology, as well as critical realism, a third point is about cultural studies, Indian philosophy and Indology. Cultural studies aim to examine its subject matter in terms of cultural practices and their relation to things such as influence and power, among others. From this perspective, religion and culture are inseparable, as beliefs and practices are uniquely cultural. For example, religious rituals, one type of practice, divide or unite believers in a religion. Religion, or the better name for it, dharma in India, as well as Christianity, Islam, Sikhism, and others, are an essential element of the human condition. Indian religions and secularism are not as divided and separated as they are in the West, which naturally opens the possibility to find new ways of research. In particular, research has explored how an individual's religion, such as religious beliefs, religious denomination, strength of religious devotion, is linked to their cultural beliefs and background. While some researchers have asserted that religion is an essential part of an individual's culture, that is, as the agent, other researchers have focused more on how religion is a culture in itself, a structure. The key differences is how researchers conceptualize and operationalize both of these terms between agent and structure. The study of Indian system of learning are crucially dependent on, for example, axiology, that is the study of values such as goodness. Epistemology is the pillar of the Indian philosophy. One important aspect of Indian philosophy is the study of consciousness. It is the epistemology's subjectivity, the social sciences agent, as well as the key of causal mechanisms that act as various tendencies for humans. Humans have bodies with a brain, a mind, reason, and identity as gender, but these are viewed as material and subtle matter from the Indian ancient system. Consciousness, according to the Upanishads, is called Atman, the transcendental and metaphysic spiritual soul or self within, which is also developed through inwardness and practices such as spiritual sound, such as Om. Religions such as Christianity, Islam, and Buddhism and others have a similar concept of the self that is higher than the body and the brain. Consciousness as a possible interdisciplinary science is studied today as a cause of reincarnation by the Division of Perceptual Studies of the University of Virginia in the US. Another one is near-death experience, which is studied by the International Association for Near-Death Studies in North Carolina in the US, with the only journal in this area, the Journal of Near-Death Studies. Another interesting interdisciplinary part of social studies and humanities is ecology, the understanding of the value and conscious importance of animals, trees, rivers, and nature in a holistic understanding of life. This is part of Indic studies, but it can also be studied as general culture. There are as well interesting studies of religion and spirituality, of both mental health and physical health, for example. A last example is interreligious social research between, for example, Hinduism, Christianity, and Islam, where there are common principles such as consciousness, as well as structure of human relations. With this backdrop, I conclude by a brief summary of the content of the program. A social science researcher has to know the nitty-gritty of anticipating knowledge, which will help him/her to experience the essence of research on the basis of epistemology and ontology. Through this workshop, the participants will be able to get an idea about the recent trends of research in social sciences and humanities, focusing on the core of the qualitative methods aiming for research designing, hypothesis formation, data collection, survey methods, field study, content analysis, and others with the notion of criticality. The workshop will be also highlighting on the research issues related to Indic studies and Indology. I look forward to the large coming field of presentations with discussions. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.